This is the second of a couple tutorials in the Let's Make an Enemy series, where I just create some enemies. And just like the last one, I want to warn you that we are building off of the prior tutorials, and I'm going to be using code from those tutorials without explaining it. But let's jump right in. I'm going to modify the jumping square enemy to be a combination of the jumping square and the crusher. So let's start with the jumping square. It moves around, and if it sees the player, jumps towards them with sort of a long, low jump. I want to create a variation of this where the square jumps high into the air and, when it is over the player, goes straight down and tries to crush the player. But before we modify our jumping square, let's review its state machine. It has 3 states: the walk state, the jump state, and the wait state. It can move from the walk state into the jump state if it sees the player, and after that, always moves back into the wait state, and then, after alarm 1 fires, back into the walk state. To create this new enemy, we're going to need to modify this state machine. And it might be worth pausing for a moment here to think about what you would need to change and add in order to get this square to jump towards the player and then try to crush the player if the enemy is above the player. Here's my solution. We need essentially 2 things. First, a new state. I'll call it the falling state. And second, we need a way to switch into it. Our state diagram would then look like this. From the walk state, the player can enter the jump state, same as before. But from here, actually 2 things can happen. If the enemy doesn't get above the player, then exactly what happened before will happen. It will enter the wait state and go back to the walk state. But if the enemy is able to get above the player, it will enter the falling state. And once it hits the ground, will enter the wait state and then from there go to the walk state. So our new state machine then looks like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate this object, rename it object little square jumper crusher, and then I'm going to go and quickly edit all 3 of these. This way we will know which object we're editing. And now let me pull up the step event for both objects. So here we go. We don't need to modify anything in the walking or the waiting state, but we do need to add our new state. That will be our falling state. And now we can actually pull up our crusher's code and look at its falling state. We can't just copy things over blindly. This line, for example, is already over here, right there. Also, our crusher is designed to sort of pause for a second once it hits the ground before switching into the rising state. We don't need to do that with our little square. So we can copy over this line, but we really just want to enter the waiting state. That should be good for our falling state. Now we need to have the check in the jumping state that will switch us to the falling state. Again, we can look at our crusher's code for examples. This might actually work, so we can copy it over. Now, it actually won't work as is. I know this because I've already created this enemy once, but I'm going to leave it like this, and we'll see the problem and then talk about how to fix it. This is a function inside of our crusher object, so let's get that as well. We can just copy it. Then we can open the create event for our little square, and we can add it down here. Again, we want to inspect this code to make sure that it will work without any changes. There doesn't appear to be any problems with it, so let's actually test it at this point. We will add our enemy to the room and run the project. Now, nothing seems to be happening. And not only does nothing seem to be happening, but the jump really isn't what we want. We want the enemy to go high into the air. So that fix is pretty easy. So we can simply come over to our jumping crusher. Let's actually get rid of these 2, put our create event over here, and up the jump speed quite a bit. We'll up it to 14. And now we have the other problem. It doesn't actually seem to be doing anything. Well, we could run this in the debugger to see what is actually happening, but I'll just tell you that it is entering the falling state. However, we are not setting our H speed to 0. Since we are not setting our H speed to 0, there's nothing in our falling code that will actually stop the enemy from moving left to right. So even though it's falling, all we've really done is just set it on autopilot. To fix this, we need to stop our enemy by setting our H speed and V speed to 0 before entering the falling state. This is the mistake that I mentioned before. Let's run this one more time and see if this fixes our 2 problems. And there we go. Our enemy jumps towards us very high into the air, and if it is above the player, tries to crush the player. If, for example, the enemy doesn't hit the player, then it enters the waiting state and continues walking like normal. So there we go. There is one very important thing I want to say, but before I do that, I want to recap the steps that I just went through to come up with this new variation. First, I started with something I already had. I came up with an idea to modify it and thought through that idea. I went and looked at other code I had that was similar, but, and this is important, I didn't just copy it over blindly. I thought about each piece of code and decided which portions I thought I could use without changing, and which portions needed to be changed to fit with the new idea. I then tested it and noticed that a few things weren't working, went back, made some changes, and after those changes, it worked. And of course, this is a tutorial. I'm showing you something I've already done, but this is the process that I went through in order to make this enemy. While creating this tutorial, I realized that I didn't like something about this new enemy. I don't like how after it jumps towards you, it continues walking in the same direction it was going before, even if you're on the other side of it. It's like the enemy has amnesia and forgot that it was trying to crush you. So let's go through the process that I just discussed one more time and fix this problem. We have our current enemy, and now I want to modify it. My idea to modify it is to make it reevaluate which direction it should go when it enters the walking state based upon where the player is in relation to it. Since direction is decided by the variable dir, that means setting this variable when the enemy enters the walking state. And if you've been following along, you know that we have code to do just that, our chaser enemy. So we can come over to our chaser enemy, we can copy this code into our enter walking state, and now we need to evaluate it. We don't do anything with the vertical speed, so we can just get rid of that line. And we're not going to be multiplying anything by an acceleration force, so we can get rid of that line. In fact, all we really need is this portion right here. And then we need to set the variable dir to that value. Since our h speed is set with this value, this should be all we need to do. Let's run it one more time. Now we can see that our enemy jumps towards our player, and after jumping towards our player, reevaluates which direction it should walk in when it enters the walking state. And of course we could build on this. For example, maybe we want to use the vision cone idea to check whether or not the enemy can see the player before switching its direction. But I'll leave that up to you. In the next video, we'll come up with a method to keep our enemies from walking off cliffs. And after that, I'm going to introduce the idea of using structs and functions as state machines instead of using switch statements.